Welcome to calm, dreamy sleep, a peaceful place where stories become dreams. Just relax and slowly close your eyes. Take a gentle breath in and let the day quietly drift away. If this story brings you peace, if you feel calmer, lighter, please subscribe and like. A long time ago, in the days when England was still young, when kings ruled from great halls and forests covered much of the land, there lived a poor widow and her only son. Their cottage stood in a quiet valley, far from any town, surrounded by green hills and winding lanes. The widow's name was Margaret, and her son, she called him Elias. Elias was a good-hearted boy, but he had been indulged too much. His mother, having lost her husband when Elias was very small, had spoiled him with love and kindness. She could deny him nothing. And so, as he grew, Elias became careless with their belongings, thoughtless with their money, and too fond of his own pleasures. Not because he was bad, but because he had never learned to be otherwise. By degrees, all that they had was spent. Their savings vanished, their small treasures sold, until, at last, nothing remained but one thing: a cow. One morning, Margaret looked at her son with sadness in her eyes. "Elias," she said gently, "we have nothing left. No money, no food, nothing but our dear cow. I must part with her, though it breaks my heart." For a moment, Elias felt sorry. He saw the tears in his mother's eyes, and his own heart ached. But the feeling passed quickly, and he began to beg her, to plead with her, to let him take the cow to market. He would get a good price. He promised. He would not be foolish this time. And so, reluctantly, his mother agreed. Elias set out along the lane, leading the cow by a rope. The morning was soft and golden, birds singing in the hedgerows, wildflowers nodding in the breeze. He had not gone far when he met an old man. The man was strange-looking, with bright eyes that seemed to see right through him. In his hat, he carried a handful of beans. Not ordinary beans. These were of many colors, red and blue and purple and gold, gleaming in the sunlight like tiny jewels. The old man stopped and looked at the cow. Then he looked at Elias. "Going to market, young man?" "Yes," said Elias. The old man smiled. "I'll make you a trade," he said. "Give me the cow, and you can have all the beans in my hat." Elias stared at the beans. They were so beautiful, so unusual. Surely, he thought, beans like these must be worth something. And the cow, well, the cow was just a cow. Without another thought, without a moment's hesitation, he made the trade. The old man took the cow and disappeared down the lane, and Elias hurried home, clutching his handful of colorful beans, eager to show his mother what he had done. When Margaret saw the beans and heard how her son had traded their last possession, her heart broke. For the first time in her life, she could not hold back her anger. "Foolish boy," she cried. "Cruel, foolish boy. You have brought us to nothing." And she snatched the beans from his hand and threw them out the window. They scattered across the garden bed below. Then Margaret sat down, covered her face with her apron, and wept. Elias tried to comfort her. He did not know what to say. He had meant no harm. He had only thought the beans were pretty. That night, they went to bed without supper. The cottage was cold and quiet, and Elias, for the first time in his life, lay awake, thinking about what he had done. In the morning, Elias woke to find his room strangely dark. Something was blocking the window. Something green. He ran downstairs and out into the garden, and there he stopped, staring upward, his mouth open in wonder. The beans had taken root, and they had grown, and grown, and grown. A great vine had risen from the garden bed, its stalk thick as a tree trunk, its leaves broad as wagon wheels. It twisted upward, higher than the tallest oak, higher than the hills, higher than the clouds themselves. It seemed to disappear into the very sky. Elias felt something stir inside him. A longing, a curiosity, a desire to know what lay at the top of that impossible vine. He ran to tell his mother, but when he did, Margaret grew pale with fear. "No, Elias," she whispered. "You must not climb it. Something terrible waits up there. I feel it in my heart." But Elias could not be dissuaded. The longing was too strong. He kissed his mother, promised he would return, and began to climb. Up and up and up he went. The world below grew small. The cottage became a dot. The hills became wrinkles on the earth. And still he climbed. For hours he climbed, his hands gripping the thick vine, his feet finding footholds in the rough bark. Until at last, he pulled himself over the top and found himself in a strange and empty land. It was a barren place. No trees grew there, no grass, no flowers, only scattered stones and heaps of earth under a pale and silent sky. Elias sat down on a rock, tired and hungry, and wondered what he had done. He thought of his mother, alone in their cottage, waiting for him. He thought of how foolish he had been, and he wept. But as he sat there, a light appeared in the distance. It grew brighter as it approached, and soon, Elias saw that it came from a woman, a beautiful woman, dressed in shimmering robes, carrying a wand of silver, topped with a golden bird. She smiled at him, a warm and gentle smile. "Do not weep, Elias," she said. "I have been waiting for you." Elias wiped his eyes. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I am a spirit of the air," she said, "and I was your father's guardian long ago." At these words, Elias felt his heart lurch. His father. He knew so little about him. His mother would never speak of him. "Your father," the spirit continued, her voice growing soft with sorrow, "was a good man, a kind man, generous and true. He had a beautiful home, a loving wife, and more riches than he could count." She paused. But he had one terrible mistake. He trusted a false friend. "A giant," she said quietly. "A cruel and greedy giant. Your father had saved him from ruin, and in return, the giant betrayed him and took everything he owned." Elias felt a fire kindle in his chest. "He made your mother promise never to tell you," the spirit went on. "He threatened to harm you both if she did. And then he sent her away, with nothing but you in her arms, to make her way in the world alone." The spirit looked at Elias with love in her eyes. "I could not help her then. My power was lost for a time. But it returned on the day you traded the cow. It was I who made you notice those beans. It was I who made the vine grow. And it was I who brought you here." She pointed toward the horizon. "The giant lives there, in a great house. Everything he has, every treasure, every coin, belonged to your father. It is yours by right. You must take it back. You must honor your father's memory." Elias was brave, and his heart burned with the desire to do what was right. He nodded. "I will go," he said. The spirit smiled. "Be careful," she said. "The giant is powerful, but you are clever, and I will watch over you." And then she vanished, like mist in the morning sun. Elias walked for many miles. The sun crossed the sky and began to sink, and at last, just as evening fell, he saw it. A great mansion, standing alone in the desolate land. It was built of dark stone, with tall windows and heavy doors. And standing at the door was a woman. She looked tired and sad. Elias approached her. "Please, good woman," he said. "I am lost and hungry. Could you spare a bit of bread and a place to sleep?" The woman looked at him with surprise. "You cannot stay here," she whispered. "My husband, he is a giant. He eats human flesh when he can find it. He would kill you without a thought." Elias trembled inside. but he did not show it. "Please," he said again, "just for one night, hide me somewhere. He will never know." The woman hesitated, but she had a kind heart, and she could not bear to turn away a hungry child. "Come in quickly," she said. "I will hide you in the oven." She led him through the house. It was grand, richly furnished, but dark and cold and empty feeling. They passed a long gallery, and on one side, Elias saw iron bars. Behind them, in the darkness, he heard groaning. The giant's prisoners, waiting. Elias's blood ran cold, but he said nothing. The woman brought him to the kitchen, gave him bread and milk, and then opened the great iron door of the oven. "Hide here," she whispered, "and do not make a sound." Elias climbed inside. The oven was cold and dark, but he could see through a small crack in the door. And then he heard it. Boom. 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 The whole house shook with every step. The giant had come home. He threw open the door and stomped into the kitchen, so huge that his head nearly touched the ceiling. His voice was like thunder. "Wife, I smell fresh meat." The woman trembled. "It's only the crows, husband. They left some meat on the roof." The giant grumbled, but he sat down at the table. Elias watched through the crack as the giant ate and ate and ate. Whole joints of meat, loaves of bread, flagons of ale. It seemed he would never stop. At last, leaning back in his chair, the giant roared, "Wife, bring me my hen." The woman hurried away and returned carrying a beautiful hen. Its feathers were soft and golden. The giant placed it on the table and said, "Lay." And the hen laid an egg of solid gold. "Lay again." Another golden egg, and another, and another. Elias stared in wonder. This hen, he thought, belonged to his father. This treasure was rightfully his. The giant played with his hen for a long time, laughing with greedy delight. Then he sent his wife to bed and fell asleep by the fire. His snores shook the room like rolling thunder. Elias waited until he was sure the giant was deep in sleep. Then, slowly, silently, he pushed open the oven door. He crept across the kitchen. His heart pounded in his chest. He reached the table, reached out his hand, and seized the hen. It made no sound. Elias ran, out of the kitchen, through the dark halls, past the prisoner's dungeon, out into the night. He ran and ran until he reached the top of the great vine. And then he climbed down, down, and down, and down. For 2 whole days, he climbed, the hen tucked safely under his arm. And when at last he reached the bottom, his mother was waiting. She wept with joy to see him. Elias placed the hen on the table. "Lay," he said. And the hen laid a golden egg. For many months, Elias and his mother lived in comfort. They sold the golden eggs, bought food and warm clothes, repaired their cottage. Elias was happy, but in his heart, he could not forget. His father's betrayers still lived. More treasures still waited. One morning, he woke early, before the sun had risen. He dressed in a disguise, colored his skin to look different, and crept out to the garden. The great vine still stood, reaching into the clouds, and Elias began to climb. This time, he knew the way. He reached the top and walked again through the barren land. He came again to the giant's house as evening fell. The woman stood at the door. She did not recognize him. "Please, good woman," he said. "I am lost and hungry. Can you help me?" The woman hesitated. "A boy came here once before," she said sadly. "He stole my husband's treasure. My husband has been even crueler since. I dare not let anyone in." Elias felt sorry for her, but he begged and pleaded until at last she relented. She hid him in a closet, full of old clothes and dust. The giant came home. Boom. 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 "I smell fresh meat," he roared. His wife said it was only the crows. The giant grumbled, but he sat down to eat. When he had finished, he called for his money bags. 2 great bags, one filled with gold coins, one filled with silver. He emptied them on the table and counted his treasure, laughing with pleasure. Then he put the coins back in the bags, tied them carefully, and set them by his chair. A little dog lay beside them. Soon, the giant fell asleep. Elias crept out of the closet. He reached for the bags, but the little dog woke and began to bark. Elias froze. His heart stopped. But the giant, deep in his drunken sleep, did not stir. Elias took a piece of meat from the table and threw it to the dog. The dog stopped barking and began to eat. Elias seized the bags, one on each shoulder, and ran. They were so heavy, he could barely carry them. But he ran through the dark halls, past the prisoner's dungeon, out into the night, and climbed down the vine. For 2 whole days he climbed, the bags weighing him down, his arms aching, his legs trembling. But he made it. When he reached the bottom, his mother was not there. The cottage was empty. Elias searched everywhere, growing more frightened with each empty room. At last, a neighbor told him his mother was ill, very ill. She lay in a small house nearby, weak with fever. Elias rushed to her side. She was so pale, so thin. He blamed himself. His adventures, his absences, had broken her heart. But when she saw him, when she heard his voice, she began to recover. Slowly, day by day, she grew stronger. And Elias gave her the money bags. They rebuilt their cottage, made it warm and beautiful. And for 3 years, they lived in peace. But Elias could not forget. The giant still lived. His father's harp, a magical harp that played music by itself, still waited in that dark house. Elias longed for it. He dreamed of it. He knew he must go back. His mother begged him not to. She wept and pleaded. But Elias could not be dissuaded. On the longest day of the year, he rose before dawn. He put on a new disguise, better than before, and he climbed the vine. For the 3rd time, he crossed the barren land. For the 3rd time, he came to the giant's house at evening. The woman stood at the door. She looked at him without recognition. "Please," Elias said. "I am lost. I am hungry. Please help me." The woman shook her head. "I cannot. Twice before I have helped boys, and twice my husband has lost treasure. He will be angry if it happens again." But Elias begged. He told her a pitiful story. And at last, her kind heart gave in. She hid him in the copper, a great metal pot used for boiling water. The giant came home. Boom, boom, boom. "I smell fresh meat," he roared. His wife said it was only the crows, but this time the giant was suspicious. He stomped around the kitchen, looking in cupboards, under tables. He came to the copper. He put his hand on the lid. Elias held his breath. His heart stopped. This was the end. But the giant grunted and turned away. He did not lift the lid. Elias almost wept with relief. The giant ate his supper, and when he had finished, he called for his harp. His wife brought it. It was the most beautiful harp Elias had ever seen. It seemed to glow with its own soft light. "Play," said the giant. And the harp began to play. Music filled the room. Sweet, gentle, sorrowful music. Music that made Elias think of his father, of all that had been lost, of all that still waited to be reclaimed. The giant, who did not truly love music, soon fell asleep. His snores filled the room like thunder. Elias waited. Waited until he was sure. Then he pushed open the copper lid, crept out, and seized the harp. But the harp was enchanted. As soon as it felt itself in strange hands, it cried out, "Master! Master! Help!" The giant woke. He saw Elias running for the door. "Thief!" he roared. "You stole my hen! You stole my gold! Now you steal my harp! I'll get you. Elias ran. He ran faster than he had ever run. The harp cried out all the way, but Elias would not let it go. The giant stumbled after him, drunk and clumsy. But Elias was young and quick. He reached the top of the vine, and he began to climb down. The harp played sorrowful music all the way. Elias climbed and climbed. His mother stood at the bottom, looking up. She saw him coming, and behind him, far above, she saw the giant beginning to descend. Elias reached the ground. "Mother, the axe, quick!" She ran and brought it. Elias swung with all his might. Once, twice, 3 times. The great vine shuddered. And then it fell. The giant fell with it, down from the clouds, down through the air, down to the earth below. And when he landed, he never moved again. Elias stood there, breathing hard, the harp silent in his arms. His mother came to him and held him tight. And then, a light appeared. The Spirit stood before them, shining with love. She explained everything to Margaret. She told her how Elias had honored his father's memory, how he had been brave and true, how he was his father's own son. Margaret wept, but this time with joy. She was proud of her boy, so proud. The Spirit blessed them both and vanished. Elias and his mother lived happily after that. They wanted for nothing. The hen laid golden eggs whenever they wished. The harp played music to soothe their hearts. And the great vine, which had brought Elias to adventure and danger and triumph, slowly withered away, turning to dust, becoming nothing but a memory. But Elias never forgot. He remembered his father, whom he had never known, but whose courage lived on in his own heart. He remembered the Spirit who had guided him. He remembered the giant's wife and hoped she had found peace. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the light was golden and the air was still, he would look up at the sky and wonder what other worlds might lie beyond the clouds, what other adventures waited, what other dreams might one day come true. Let yourself drift now. Drift like Elias, drifting through clouds on his way to a strange land. Drift like golden eggs resting in soft velvet. Thanks for listening and liking our stories. Before moving towards second story, please subscribe, like, and hit that bell icon for more upcoming exciting fairy tales. There once lived in a small village a woodcutter and his wife who had 7 children, all boys. The eldest was no more than 10 years old, and the youngest was only 7. Now it was odd enough, to be sure, that they should have so many children in such a short time. But the truth was, the wife often brought him 2, and sometimes 3 at once. This made them very poor, for not one of these boys was old enough to work, to earn, to help provide. And what was worse, the youngest was a tiny little fellow who hardly ever spoke a word. Now this, indeed, was a mark of his good sense, for he listened more than he talked, and heard more than people thought. But his father and mother did not understand this. They thought him silly. They thought him simple. They thought he would never amount to anything. This boy was the smallest child they had ever seen. When he was born, he was no bigger than a man's thumb. And so they christened him with a name that stuck: Little Peck. The poor child was the drudge of the whole house. He did the jobs no one else wanted to do. He ran the errands no one else wanted to run. And when anything went wrong, Little Peck was always the one who got the blame. But for all this, Little Peck was far more clever than any of his brothers. He watched. He listened. He learned. And though he spoke but little, he knew and understood more than anyone ever guessed. Now it happened that a great dryness came upon the land. For want of rain, the fields grew but half as much corn and potatoes as they used to grow. And the woodcutter and his wife could no longer give their boys the food they needed. The father and mother grieved for a long time. They worried. They fretted. They stayed awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what to do. At last, they came to a terrible decision. One night, when the boys were all in bed, the woodcutter and his wife sat by the dying fire, warming their hands over the few small sticks that still burned. The husband sighed deeply. "My dear," he said quietly, "we cannot keep our children any longer. To see them starve before my eyes is more than I can bear." His wife began to cry. "Tomorrow morning," he continued, his voice heavy with sorrow, "I will take them into the deep forest and leave them there. They will be so busy gathering sticks, they will not notice us slip away, and they will not find their way back." "Ah, husband," cried the poor wife, You cannot leave your own children to die." The husband told her to think how very poor they were, how hungry the children already were, how there was no end in sight to their suffering. The wife wept and wept. But at last, she agreed. For what was worse, she thought, to watch them starve slowly, or to hope that someone, somewhere, might find them and take them in? She went sobbing to bed. But Little Peck had not been asleep. When he heard his father speaking so seriously, he had slipped away from his brother's side and crept under his father's bed to hear everything without being seen. He lay there in the darkness, listening. His heart beat fast, but his mind was clear. When his parents had finished talking and had gone to sleep, Little Peck crept back to his place beside his brothers. He did not wake them. He did not cry. He simply lay there, thinking, planning, preparing. Before the sun rose, little Peck slipped out of bed and ran to the stream that ran near their cottage. The water sparkled in the early light. He filled his pockets with small white pebbles, smooth and round and easy to see. Then he hurried back home. He said nothing to his brothers about what he had heard. He wanted them to act naturally, to be themselves, so that their parents would suspect nothing. That morning, they all set out together. The father led the way, the mother walked behind, and the 7 boys walked between them. They came to a forest so thick and dark that they could barely see each other a few steps away. The trees stood close together. Their branches tangled overhead. The light filtered down in small, scattered patches. The woodcutter began to cut wood. The children began to gather twigs and branches, piling them up to make faggots. And while they were busy, their parents slipped away, quietly, without a sound, without a backward glance. When the children looked up, they were alone. The forest surrounded them on all sides. The wind whispered through the leaves. Birds called out in the distance. But there was no sign of their mother and father. The boys began the cry, loudly, desperately. They called for their parents until their voices grew hoarse. Little Peck let them cry. He knew what to do. All along the path, he had dropped the white pebbles from his pocket, one by one, carefully, quietly, so that no one would notice. "Never mind," he said gently to his brothers. "Stop crying now. I know the way home. Just follow me." They looked at him in wonder. This tiny brother, this quiet boy they often ignored, knew what to do. They followed him, step by step, pebble by pebble, through the dark forest, past the tall trees, back toward home. When they reached their cottage, they did not go inside at first. They stood at the door, listening. Inside, their parents were talking. Just as the woodcutter and his wife had returned home, broken-hearted and full of grief, a gentleman from the village had come to pay them 2 gold coins for work they had done long ago. Money they had never expected to see. Money that meant they could eat again. The wife had gone out immediately and bought meat, enough meat for 6 or 8 people. She had forgotten, in her relief, that her children were not there to share it. But now, as she and her husband sat at the table, the truth came crashing down upon her. "Alas," she cried, "where are our poor children? How they would feast on what we have left. Oh, husband, this is all your fault. I told you we would regret leaving them in the forest. Perhaps they have already been eaten by wolves." She wept bitterly. "Alas, alas, what has become of my dear children?" And then, from outside the door, came a small voice. "Here we are, Mother. Here we are." She flew to the door like the wind. She threw it open, and there stood all 7 of her boys, dirty, tired, but alive. She kissed every one of them. She held them close. She wept with joy. For a time, they were happy. The money lasted. There was food on the table, laughter in the house. But all things pass. The money ran out. The food ran out. And the woodcutter and his wife found themselves just as poor as before. Slowly, gradually, they began to think again of leaving their children in the forest. This time, they told each other, they would take them much deeper, much farther, so that they could never find their way back. They thought they spoke quietly. They thought no one was listening, but little Peck was always listening. He heard everything. The next morning, little Peck rose early to go to the stream for more pebbles. But this time, he found the door double locked. He could not get out. For a moment, his heart sank. But then his mother gave each of the children a piece of bread for breakfast. And little Peck had an idea. He did not eat his bread. He put it in his pocket. He would drop crumbs along the way instead of pebbles. Surely, he thought, that would work just as well. Soon they set out again. The parents led them deeper into the forest than before, through thicker trees, over darker paths, past places they had never seen. And when the children were busy gathering sticks, the parents slipped away once more. This time, little Peck was not worried. He had dropped his breadcrumbs all along the path. He would lead his brothers home again. But when he turned to look for the crumbs, they were gone. Every last one. The birds had eaten them all. Now the children were truly lost. They walked and walked. The forest grew darker. The trees grew taller. The shadows grew longer. Night began to fall. The wind whispered through the leaves like the howling of wolves. The children trembled with fear. They huddled together. They dared not speak. They dared not move. Then, rain began to fall. Heavy rain. Cold rain. Rain that soaked them to the skin and made the ground so slippery they fell at almost every step. Before it grew completely dark, little Peck climbed to the top of a tall tree. He looked out over the forest in every direction, and far, far away, beyond the trees, he saw a tiny light, like a candle, like a hope. He climbed down and told his brothers. They walked toward the light. When they were on high ground, they could see it. When they sank into valleys, it disappeared. But they kept walking, always toward where the light had been. At last, they reached the edge of the forest, and there, standing alone in a clearing, was a house. A large house. A dark house. And in its window, a candle burned. Little Peck knocked on the door. A woman opened it. She looked cross and tired. "What do you want?" she asked. Little Peck explained that they were lost children, that night was falling, and that they needed a place to sleep. The woman looked at them, at their small faces, at their frightened eyes. And then she began to cry. "Oh, my poor children," she whispered. "You do not know where you have come. This is the house of a giant who eats little children." Little Peck trembled, but he spoke bravely. "Madam, if we go back into the forest, the wolves will eat us for certain. We would rather take our chances here. Perhaps, when the giant sees us, he might take pity on us." The giant's wife thought for a moment. She was not a bad woman. She had a kind heart, hidden deep inside. "Come in," she said softly. "Warm yourselves by the fire. I will try to hide you when my husband comes home." The children crept inside. A great fire blazed in the hearth. A whole sheep was roasting on a spit. They stood close to the warmth, letting their wet clothes begin to dry. Suddenly, there came a loud knocking at the door. Boom, boom, boom. The giant's wife turned pale. "It is him," she whispered. "Quickly, hide under the bed. Do not move. Do not make a sound." The children scrambled under the great bed just as the door burst open. The giant strode in. He was enormous. His footsteps shook the floor. His voice rumbled like thunder. "Is supper ready?" he roared. "Is the wine fetched? I am hungry enough to eat 100 children." His wife trembled, but she served him his supper. The sheep was not quite done, but the giant liked it half raw. He tore into it with his huge teeth. Then he stopped. He sniffed the air. He sniffed again. "I smell children," he growled. "I smell fresh young flesh. It must be the calf we killed today," his wife said quickly. "I smell children," the giant roared. He rose from his chair. He strode toward the bed. He bent down and looked underneath. And there, huddled together in terror, were the 7 little boys. The giant laughed, a terrible laugh. "Well, well," he said, "what have we here?" "A feast for tomorrow. My friends are coming to dine, and they will love these tender morsels." He pulled them out one by one. They fell to their knees. They begged for mercy. But the giant had no mercy in his heart. He fetched a large knife and began to sharpen it on a stone. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound was horrible. He reached for one of the boys, but his wife spoke up. "Why kill them tonight?" she said. "They will keep until morning, and you have so much meat already. The calf, the sheep, half a pig. Let them rest. Let them eat. They will be plump and tender for tomorrow's dinner." The giant thought about this. "Very well," he said at last. "Feed them, then put them to bed. I will deal with them in the morning." The children were given food, but they were too frightened to eat. They sat in silence, waiting. wondering what would become of them. The giant drank his wine. He drank a great deal, and soon he stumbled off to bed. Now the giant had 7 daughters, young giants, all of them. They had small gray eyes, round and sunken, hooked noses, wide mouths, and long, sharp teeth. They were already cruel, even as children. They slept in a great bed together, each wearing a little golden crown on her head. The giant's wife put the 7 boys in another bed, the same size, in the same room. Then she went to bed beside her husband. Little Peck lay awake. He could not sleep. He was afraid the giant might wake in the night, change his mind, and kill them all before morning. So he waited. He listened. He planned. In the deepest part of the night, when everyone was asleep, he crept out of bed as softly as he could. He took off his brother's nightcaps and his own. He crept to the bed where the giant's daughters slept. He took off their golden crowns and put the nightcaps on their heads instead. Then he put the golden crowns on his brothers' heads and on his own. And he crept back into bed. He lay there, heart pounding, waiting. Just as he had hoped, the giant woke in the middle of the night. He stretched. He grunted. And then he remembered the children. "Why wait until morning?" he muttered. "I will do it now." He took his knife and crept into the room where they all slept. It was dark. He could barely see. He felt his way to the first bed, the one where his daughters slept, but he did not know that. He felt their heads. He felt the nightcaps. "Ah," he whispered, "here are the boys." And in the darkness, he killed all 7 of his own daughters. Then he crept back to bed, satisfied, and fell asleep. As soon as Little Peck heard him snore, he woke his brothers. "Quickly," he whispered, "dress yourselves. Follow me. Not a sound." They crept out of the house, through the garden, over the wall, and away into the night. They ran and ran. They did not know where they were going. They only knew they had to get as far away as possible. In the morning, the giant woke. He stretched. He yawned. And then he remembered his plan. "Wife," he called, "go and dress those little rascals. Prepare them for our guests." His wife went upstairs. And there she found her 7 daughters, dead in their bed. Their throats cut. Their blood everywhere. She fainted. When she did not return, the giant went to see what was keeping her. And then he saw. He saw what he had done. He let out a roar of rage and grief. "The boys!" he screamed. "Those little vipers. They will pay for this." He threw water on his wife's face until she woke. "Bring me my 7-league boots," he commanded. "I will catch them if I have to stride across the entire world." He pulled on the magic boots, each one 7 leagues long, and set off. With every step, he covered miles. Mountains were nothing to him. Rivers were tiny streams. He strode across the land, searching, hunting, raging. The children saw him coming. They saw him step from mountain to mountain. They saw him cross rivers in a single stride. They knew they could not outrun him. But little Peck spotted a hollow place under a large rock. "Quickly," he whispered, "hide in there." They all scrambled inside. Little Peck peered out through a crack, watching. The giant came closer and closer. But even magic boots grow tiresome. He had been striding for hours. He was weary. The sun was warm. And so, he sat down to rest. Right on top of the very rock where the children were hiding. Soon, he was snoring. Snoring so loud that the ground shook. Little Peck saw his chance. He crept out. He crept up to the sleeping giant. And very, very carefully, he pulled off the 7-league boots. They were enormous, but they were magic. And magic boots can fit anyone they choose. Little Peck put them on, and suddenly he felt powerful. He felt tall. He felt as if he could go anywhere, do anything. He told his brothers to run home. He would take care of the rest. They ran, and Little Peck, wearing the magic boots, set off in a different direction. He strode to the king's palace. He offered his services. He could carry messages faster than any horse, any coach, any messenger the king had ever known. The king was amazed. He sent Little Peck to the battlefield with urgent orders. Little Peck was back before anyone thought it possible. He brought news of victories. He carried secrets safely across the land. And soon, he became the king's most trusted messenger. Wealthy, respected, happy. He sent for his parents. He sent for his brothers. He bought them a fine house and made sure they never went hungry again. As for the giant, he woke to find his boots gone. He tried to walk, but without them, he was stuck where he sat. He could not move. He could not hunt. He could not rage. He lay there on the rock, waiting. And in the night, a serpent came out of the forest, and that was the end of him. Little Peck heard the news and smiled. He remembered the giant's wife, the one who had tried to help them. He asked the king to give her a title, and she became a duchess, living in comfort for the rest of her days. And Little Peck, he grew wiser and braver with every passing year. Until at last, the king made him the greatest lord in all the kingdom. and he lived happily ever after. Let yourself drift now. Drift like little peck drifting through the dark forest. Drift like the small white pebbles scattered along the path. Drift like dreams coming softly to carry you away. There is nothing you need to do tonight. Nothing you need to solve. Nothing you need to carry. Just rest. Just breathe. Just be. Feel the soft support beneath you, holding you, keeping you safe. Hear the sound of my voice, like a friend sitting beside you in the darkness, watching over you, caring for you, guiding you gently toward dreams. The night is soft. The night is kind. The night is holding you in its gentle arms. Sleep is waiting, waiting with open arms, waiting to welcome you home. Let yourself go now. Let yourself fall gently, like a leaf falling from a tree in autumn. Like a snowflake drifting down in the quiet hours before dawn. Like a whisper becoming silence. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. Sleep sweetly. Good night, dear one. Good night. Final pause. There once was a gentleman, a kind and honest man, who lived with his young daughter in a comfortable house at the edge of a great forest. His wife had passed away when the girl was very small, and he had raised her alone, with love and patience through all the years. She was a gentle child, with her mother's kind eyes and her mother's warm heart, and she brought sunshine into every room she entered. But the gentleman grew lonely as the years passed, and at last he remarried. His new wife was a widow, a woman of proud bearing and sharp tongue, who had 2 daughters of her own. From the very first day, the stepmother made it clear that she did not care for her husband's daughter. The girl was too kind, too gentle, too good, and her very presence seemed to irritate the woman. She gave the girl all the hardest work to do: scrubbing floors, cleaning grates, dusting every room from top to bottom, washing dishes until her hands were red and raw. And when the work was done, the girl had no place to rest. Her stepsisters had beautiful chambers with soft beds and velvet curtains, with mirrors that reached from floor to ceiling, with warm fires that burned all night. But the girl was sent to sleep in the attic, on a thin mattress stuffed with straw, with only one wooden chair and a broken window that let in the cold night air. She never complained. She never spoke a word against her stepmother or stepsisters. She knew her father loved her, but she also knew he was ruled by his new wife, and she did not wish to trouble him. When her work was finished each evening, she would sit in the chimney corner, close to the warmth of the dying fire, among the soft gray ashes that gathered there. And because of this, her stepsisters gave her a name, a cruel name. They called her Ash Girl. But even in her ragged clothes, even with ash smudged on her cheeks, she was more beautiful than they could ever be. And they hated her for it. Now it happened that the king's son, the prince of that land, was to give a series of balls. He was of age to marry, and his father and mother hoped he would find a bride among the noble ladies of the kingdom. Invitations were sent to every fine family in the land, and among them, to the stepmother and her 2 daughters. Oh, how excited they were. They talked of nothing but the ball for days and days. What they would wear, how they would do their hair, which jewels would best suit their complexions. The elder sister said she would wear her velvet gown, deep crimson with trimmings of fine lace. The younger sister said she would wear her silk petticoat with an overskirt of flowered brocade and her diamond tiara, which was finer than anything her sister owned. This led to arguments, and the arguments led to shouting, and the shouting led to tears. And through it all, Ash Girl listened quietly from the chimney corner, saying nothing. At last, the sisters called to her. They knew she had good taste, though she never had anything fine to wear. They knew she could arrange hair better than anyone in the city, and so they commanded her to help them prepare. Ash Girl came willingly. She brushed their long hair until it shone. She arranged their curls in the latest fashion. She helped them into their gowns, fastening tiny buttons and adjusting falling ruffles. She did it all with gentle hands and a kind heart, never once showing any bitterness. As she worked on the elder sister's hair, the girl spoke sharply. "Ash Girl, do you not wish you were going to the ball?" Ash Girl's hands paused for just a moment. Then she continued her work. "Madam," she said softly, for they made her call them Madam, "you are only mocking me. It is not my fortune to have such pleasures." The elder sister laughed. "You are right. People would only laugh to see a little Ash Girl at a ball. Any other girl might have pulled the hair or tangled the curls, but Ash Girl was good. She finished the hair perfectly, smooth and elegant, as pretty as could be. At last, the sisters were ready. They had scarcely eaten for 2 days, trying to make themselves slender. They had broken half a dozen laces, pulling them tight around their waists. But now they were beautiful, or so they believed. Ash Girl followed them to the door, watched as they climbed into the waiting carriage, watched as it rolled away down the lane. And when the last sound of wheels had faded into the evening, she went back to the kitchen, sat down in the chimney corner, and cried. The fire crackled softly. The ashes stirred in the hearth, and suddenly, there was someone beside her. A woman. Small and kind-faced, with eyes that sparkled like stars. Ash Girl had never seen her before, but something about her felt familiar, felt safe, felt like home. "What are you crying for, my dear?" the woman asked gently. Ash Girl tried to speak, but her sobs stopped her. She could only whisper, I wish. The woman smiled. You wish to go to the ball, isn't that so? Ash Girl nodded. Then be a good girl, said the woman, and you shall go. She reached out and touched Ash Girl's cheek, and her touch was warm, like sunlight through a window. First, she said, run into the garden and fetch me the largest pumpkin you can find. Ash Girl did not understand. What could a pumpkin have to do with going to a ball? But she was obedient and kind, and she did as she was asked. She brought the largest pumpkin from the garden, round and golden, heavy in her arms. The woman took it, scooped out the inside until it was hollow, and then touched it with a small wand that seemed to appear from nowhere. In an instant, the pumpkin transformed. It became a magnificent carriage, gilded and gleaming, lined with rose-colored satin, with windows of crystal and doors of polished wood. Ash Girl stared, her eyes wide with wonder. Now, said the woman, fetch me the mousetrap from the pantry. Ash Girl brought it. Inside were 6 fat mice, soft and gray, nibbling at the cheese. The woman lifted the wire door, and as each mouse ran out, she touched it with her wand. One by one, they became beautiful horses, dappled gray, with flowing manes and tails, stamping their hooves gently, ready to run. But what shall we do for a coachman? Asked the woman. Ash Girl thought for a moment. There is a large rat in the rat trap, she said. Perhaps he might do? The woman smiled. Fetch him. The rat was brought, and with a touch of the wand, he became a fine coachman with the most magnificent whiskers imaginable, wearing a smart coat and a tall hat. Then the woman took 6 lizards from behind the pumpkin frame and touched them each in turn. They became 6 footmen in splendid livery, all in gold and blue, who immediately jumped up behind the carriage as if they had been footmen all their lives. Well, Ash Girl, said the woman, now you can go to the ball. Ash Girl looked down at herself, at her ragged dress, at her bare feet, at her hands still gray with ash. What in these clothes? She whispered. The woman laughed softly, a warm sound, like bells in the distance. She touched Ash Girl with her wand. And in that moment, everything changed. The threadbare jacket became cloth of gold, stiff with embroidery, sparkling with jewels. The woolen petticoat lengthened into a gown of sweeping satin, the color of moonlight that shimmered with every movement. And her little feet, no longer bare, were covered in silk stockings and the prettiest slippers imaginable. Slippers made of glass, clear as water, sparkling like diamonds. Ash Girl could not speak. She could only stare at herself in wonder. Now, said the woman gently, you may go, but you must remember one thing. Ash Girl looked at her, If you stay 1 moment past midnight, your carriage will become a pumpkin again. Your horses will become mice. Your coachman will become a rat. Your footmen will become lizards. And you will become the little ash girl you were an hour ago. Ash Girl nodded. She understood. She would not forget. She climbed into the carriage, and the footman closed the door behind her. The coachman flicked the reins, and the horses began to move, pulling her smoothly down the lane, toward the palace, toward the ball. The palace was ablaze with light. Music drifted through the open windows. Ladies and gentlemen in their finest clothes filled the grand halls. And at the entrance, waiting as if he knew someone special would arrive, stood the prince. When the golden carriage pulled up, when the footman opened the door, when Ash Girl stepped out in her gown of moonlight, the prince caught his breath. He had never seen anyone so beautiful. He offered her his hand and led her into the ballroom. The crowd parted before them. Whispers followed in their wake. Who is she? Have you ever seen such beauty? Where does she come from? But no one knew. No one could say. The prince danced with her all evening. She moved like water, like wind, like moonlight on the sea. He could not take his eyes from her. Even the old king remarked to the queen that he had not seen such grace and beauty since Her Majesty's own youth. And Ash Girl, poor Ash Girl, who had never been to a ball, who had never worn a fine dress, who had never been admired by anyone, felt as if she were dreaming. A beautiful dream, one she hoped would never end. She saw her stepsisters across the room. They did not recognize her. How could they? She was so changed. She went to them, sat beside them, spoke to them kindly. She offered them fruits from the refreshment table. She complimented their dresses. They were flattered beyond words that this beautiful princess, for surely she must be a princess, would pay them such attention. They had no idea who she really was. The evening flew by. The music played. The candles burned low. And Ash Girl was so happy, so completely happy, that she forgot to watch the clock. Then, suddenly, she heard it. The first chime of midnight. She rose from her seat, murmured an apology to the prince, and fled. Down the grand staircase, through the glittering halls, past the astonished guests. The prince ran after her, but he could not catch her. As she reached the palace doors, the clock struck the last stroke of 12. And in that instant, her gown vanished. Her carriage became a pumpkin. Her horses became mice. Her coachman became a rat. Her footmen became lizards. And Ash Girl, beautiful Ash Girl, became once more the little cinder wench in ragged clothes. She ran home through the dark streets, breathless and cold, with nothing left of her magical evening but one thing. One small glass slipper. The other she had dropped on the palace steps as she fled. When her stepsisters returned home, they could talk of nothing but the ball and the mysterious princess who had appeared, and how she had fled at midnight, and how the prince had found her glass slipper and would not let it go. He looked at it constantly, they said, turned it over and over in his hands. They said he was clearly in love with the lady who had worn it. Ash Girl listened from the chimney corner. Her face was turned toward the fire, and perhaps that was why her cheeks were so pink. But no one noticed. No one ever noticed her. A few days later, a herald came through the city. He carried a small glass slipper on a velvet cushion, and he announced, with trumpets and proclamations, that the prince would marry the lady whose foot fit the slipper. The lady who could produce its match. Every lady in the kingdom tried. Princesses and duchesses, countesses and simple gentlewomen. But the slipper fitted no one. It was a fairy slipper, and it would only fit the one it belonged to. At last, the herald came to the house of the two sisters. They tried with all their might to force their feet into the delicate glass shoe. But it was no use. Their feet were too large, too clumsy, too wide. "Let me try," said a soft voice from the chimney corner. The sisters burst out laughing. "You? A little ash girl like you?"
Don't be ridiculous.
But the herald had his orders. Every maiden in the city must try. No exceptions. So Ash Girl came forward. She sat down on the three-legged stool. She held out her little foot, and the herald slipped the glass slipper onto it. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then Ash Girl reached into her pocket and brought out the other slipper. She put it on her other foot, and as she stood up, the magic returned. Her ragged clothes became the gown of Moonlight. Her ash-smudged face became beautiful, and her stepsisters recognized her at last. They fell to their knees. They begged her forgiveness. They were terrified of what she might do. But Ash Girl, gentle Ash Girl, raised them up and embraced them. "I forgive you," she said softly, "with all my heart." Then she went with the herald to the palace. The prince was waiting. When he saw her, his face lit up like the sun. He knew her at once. His beautiful princess, the lady of the ball, the owner of the little glass slipper. She told him her whole story, about her stepmother, about her stepsisters, about the hard work in the attic room, about the fairy godmother who had made it all possible. The prince listened to every word, and he loved her all the more. They were married on a beautiful spring day. The stepsisters came to the wedding. They were no longer cruel. Ash Girl's kindness had changed them. And they lived, all of them, in peace and happiness ever after. Let yourself drift now. Drift like Ash Girl drifting through her magical evening. Drift like the music drifting through the palace windows. Drift like dreams coming softly to carry you away. There is nothing you need to do tonight, nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to carry. Just rest. Just breathe. Just be. Feel the soft support beneath you, holding you, keeping you safe. Hear the sound of my voice, like a friend sitting beside you in the darkness, watching over you, caring for you, guiding you gently toward dreams. The night is soft. The night is kind. The night is holding you in its gentle arms. Sleep is waiting, waiting with open arms, waiting to welcome you home. Let yourself go now. Let yourself fall gently, like a leaf falling from a tree in autumn, like a snowflake drifting down in the quiet hours before dawn, like a whisper becoming silence. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. Sleep sweetly. Tonight's story is now gently coming to an end. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for listening. You don't need to do anything now. Just rest. Let your thoughts grow quiet, one by one, like candles being softly blown out. The soft sounds you hear, the gentle rain, the quiet hush of the world outside. They will continue to play, slowly, softly, steadily, guiding you deeper and deeper into comfortable, natural sleep. Close your eyes now. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands rest open. Let your breath grow slow and easy. There is nothing to carry with you tonight. No thoughts to hold, no worries to keep. Only this quiet moment, only this gentle stillness. Allow yourself to drift away now, like a leaf on still water, like a cloud across a silent moon. Deeper and deeper and deeper still. Good night and sweet dreams.